Scientific advances in treating and preventing diseases typically takes years to be approved, but in 2020 that timeline was slashed, with experimental COVID vaccines being developed and approved within just 9 months, an outcome that has advocates for other deadly conditions asking, when's it going to be our turn?
Well, Jim, right now 133 million Americans are facing a death sentence from some kind of incurable disease. They've watched as the COVID vaccine was fast-tracked and rolled out in less than a year. Now they want to know if those same principles can be applied to other conditions, if that kind of money and scientific focus might give them a chance. Mike Magnoli and Danielle Wall from the CBS 12 News I-Team went looking for answers.
The emotional toll that chronic illness takes from families isn't something we can measure, but the financial toll on the country, the CDC says that's an estimated $3.5 trillion a year, just managing symptoms. That means that cures could save people and dollars, but 90% of experimental drugs never make it over the finish line. But this idea of COVID to cures, that's a jumping off point, because the pandemic showed us how quickly we see results when the pressure's turned up. Inside this Fort Pierce house, Todd Hendrickson is connected to machines. For the man once pictured on the cover of a magazine for being an avid boater and fisherman, life's a lot different now. Look at the blanket that Todd's under. It's a Christmas present, a photo collage of Todd before his diagnosis in 2016. That's when he was told he had ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. 4 years later, he literally cannot move.
My will to live is still strong.
Todd talks by focusing his eyes on individual letters on a screen, making words that a computer voice then reads aloud.
I'm happy to be here. Extremely grateful to be home close to family and friends, and still have hope to somehow recover from this disease.
But Todd doesn't think Operation Warp Speed will help. The vaccines we're now taking are the product of an unprecedented crisis. Todd knows ALS is not that kind of priority.
COVID has the potential to affect everyone in the world. ALS only affects about 35,000 people in the United States every year.
Right now, if you or someone in your family had ALS or any severe illness, getting an experimental treatment wouldn't be easy. First, the drug companies are very specific about which patients can take part in a trial, and even if you qualify, insurance companies often don't want to pay the extraordinary costs. A stem cell treatment called NurOwn is showing promise for ALS patients, but it costs $300,000. That's why Todd has this lotto ticket taped to his monitor. If he hits the jackpot, he would start the therapy immediately.
Yes, I don't have much to lose as long as it's not life-threatening.
But the reality is Todd would probably get turned down. His ALS is too advanced, his paralysis too complete, and NurOwn is going to early-stage patients whose symptoms and responses are easier to measure.
I'd like to think they're closer to a cure, but there are still a lot of unknowns about ALS.
Is it harder as they're older?
I'm Danielle Wall in Fort Lauderdale, where Dr. Eduardo Locatelli is working with ALS patients at the Holy Cross Neuroscience Institute. Todd Hendrickson was trying to get an appointment here before COVID interrupted the research. But Dr. Locatelli says the program had a lot of momentum.
I think the time for ALS is much more promising today than it's ever been.
NurOwn is just one experimental therapy. Another is called the Healy Multi-Platform Trial, which involves administering 4 drugs simultaneously across 4 control groups and a placebo group, with the hope that one of these medicines slows the progression of the disease.
The trial is intended to have results, within the next 2 or 3 years.
2 to 3 years. That's not bad at the pace the medical community has gotten used to. But Operation Warp Speed may be changing the math of fighting disease.
This is a real issue here. We have over 250,000 deaths, more than 20 million infections.
With COVID-19, millions of cases popped up across the globe. Billions of dollars poured into the fight against the virus. And in the U.S., the path to getting FDA approval was simplified. Regulators even told pharmaceutical companies in advance what benchmarks they needed to hit during trial phases.
So this is the progression.
But that's guidance that Locatelli and his colleagues have never been given.
Does it frustrate you that there's not a cure, there's not better treatment at this point?
For me, the way they're trying to channel my frustration is to put more time and more research and more emphasis to find something that helps them.
30 years ago, at the height of the AIDS crisis, FDA regulations were modified to speed up drug approval. That resulted in more than a dozen cutting-edge antivirals and antibiotics, some approved within weeks of the rule changes.
The medical device law.
Dr. David Kessler was head of the FDA at that time, and President Biden has tapped him to be a top medical advisor to his administration.
Which help nerve cells repair, grow, and survive.
New drugs are always in the pipeline. There's a chance in 2021 researchers could announce a breakthrough. So Todd isn't giving up.
There's people fighting for changes for experimental drugs and people trying to find a cure for ALS, but there could be a lot more support.
On the day that we visited Todd, the newest drug for ALS, Prime C, cleared a major hurdle in the U.S. and in Europe so that medical trials can start soon. But ALS is just one piece of this puzzle. Tomorrow night on CBS 12 News at 11, the I-Team looks at how COVID could impact research into MS, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's.
Right now on CBS12.com, reporters Mike Magnoli and Danielle Wall have a digital extra. Their reporter notebooks will take you behind the scenes of the interviews in tonight's story. You'll also hear them describe what it was like to put together this investigation, and you'll learn more about the backstories of the people in their report. It's at CBS12.com.